Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Cheng, and we are back after a month off. Took some time with the fam, did a little traveling, but we're back. Got 2 weeks, just 2 more weeks, guys. So the 2025 season kicks off, and we have so much to catch up on. Also, as a reminder, send us your story ideas, the Pick Six Guys at gmail.com. The email will be below in the descriptions. We want to know, what do you guys want us to see and talk about? Let us know. Maybe there's some ideas we're missing. Maybe there's some things we need to rehash and go deeper into. Let us know what you think. Okay, with that out of the way, we got to jump right into the AP and coaches preseason top 25 polls being released. Now, listen, you guys know I am really not into this. I don't agree with the practice of them, but they are kind of part of the game. And, we kind of have to cover it because the Canes are in the top 10. Can you believe it? The Canes are ranked in the AP coaches poll, both of them in the top 10 at number 10. This is the highest ranking since the 2018 season when was ranked 8th. I think this is kind of incredible. Kind of somewhere where I kind of thought we were going to be. The 2025 season marks the 8th time since 2000 that has opened the season in the top 10. It's been a rough 2 decades for us, not gonna lie. In addition to Notre Dame, will face two other teams ranked in the preseason poll during the regular season. Now, that doesn't mean any of the other teams we will play this year won't be ranked, but as of right now, because this is so important, these preseasons, just two other teams. will host the number 15 Florida Gators on September 20th and will travel to play the number 16 SMU Mustangs in Dallas on November 1st. That will be the first time we actually leave the state of Florida. Now, this marks the first season since 2004 where Miami will open their season with a top 10 opponent. The last time being when then number 5 Miami beat then number 4 Florida State 16-10 in overtime at the Orange Bowl to kick off that season. I was there. That was my first game as a student, as a sophomore. Incredible game. Went to overtime. Awesome. Also, Clemson, Miami, and SMU are the only three ACC teams who will begin the season in the top 25, although Louisville, Georgia Tech, FSU, Duke, and Pittsburgh all receive votes. Now, I actually think this is kind of fair. I mean, as much as a homer as I would love to be and say we're the number one team in the country, top five, really don't think we're there. I think we have some things to prove. I think we got a solid team, which we'll get into towards the end of the show. But I think this was possibly slightly generous ranking. I saw us anywhere between maybe 10 and 13th realistically. Looking at the top 25, I would agree with the pollsters putting us ahead of other teams like Illinois, Arizona State, and South Carolina. I don't even honestly know how in some of other pundits' rankings and polls, and even some things that people are talking about, they're saying Illinois is better or even ranked higher than us. Also, Arizona State, South Carolina, some of them. I get each of them has their star-studded people on their team, and like teams like Arizona State who have a huge returning production coming back. Again, I don't think they're better than us, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. Why? Some teams that are ahead of us that I questioned was like, not sure about them would be Oregon, Alabama, and LSU. Now, I can hear the gasp from each of the name fan bases, but here's my reasoning. Listen, let's kick it off with Oregon, the wannabe of the Northwest, right? Oregon is 109th out of I think 136 teams in returning production. Now that's something I don't want to hang my hat on all the time, but I do think it's a major number that's glaring and will add to what I'm about to say. Now, that's not the most accurate measurable for success, but they are losing their star wide receiver who is out for the season, and they have a ton of players in key positions who are young and have not started. So, again, normally I wouldn't say returning production is the key metric, but it does highlight the fact that these guys will be starting a lot of young players. And I know what you're going to say. So is not in every of the key positions and not in the most important positions. Oregon has, I think, 2 or 3 linemen that they are having to replace after losing them to the NFL draft. And starting young guys in the Big Ten could prove questionable. You know what I'm saying? Alabama. Okay, this ain't Nick Saban's team. I'm going to shout out to Thomas Castellanos on that one. This is a different Kalen DeBoer Alabama team who, let's remember, lost to Oklahoma, Vandy, and Michigan last year. All 3 of those teams, not good teams, not teams whose programs are in stellar shape last year. Their secondary was as bad as ours, maybe slightly better. And they have an unproven QB starting this year, as do a lot of teams, So I'm not sure they're that much better than us. Lastly, LSU. Well, I mean, it's Brian Kelly. To be honest, this is probably the only team of the three I could probably justify being ahead of us. But Nussmeier just recently suffered a knee injury. And while people are saying he's fine, it was just a preemptive measure with the sleeve. You never know. Knee injuries are tricky, especially preseason. They're not going full bore right now. When the season kicks off, they play Clemson. Clemson's going to come out ready to play. Who knows where they'll end up? But again, we'll have to see how each of those plays out. So, moving on to our next story. Miami to the Big Ten? So, here we go. With only 2 more weekends left until we get some actual football, it looks like some sports writers have nothing better to do than to just resuscitate fledgling rumors and see how many people will actually run with it. The one I'm referring to today is Miami to the Big Ten. It's the latest iteration, maybe its boldest yet, as Sports Talk Florida writer Jim Williams claims that Miami is actively trying to join the Big Ten as we speak. Now, there's another person, I call him the clickbait king, Craig Sheeman over at Locked On Big Ten, who took that unsubstantiated claim and kicked it up a notch, saying was begging, begging to get into the Big Ten. Okay, let's break this down, okay? First and foremost, you go through this story, 0 sources. Who are the sources? What legs does this have to stand on? I remember in journalism school and even working at a news station for nearly a decade, the number one commandment, check your sources, recheck your sources, right? And when you look at this story, not a single source was mentioned in the whole article. Not an anonymous source, not a person close to the program, or even the university or the Big Ten. Red flag should be going off in everyone's mind when they see this story, right? This is realistically just some fan fiction that some guy came up with and was desperate, and a desperate sportscaster was trying to get views and clicks for. This is nothing more than just 2 people who are trying to get message boards fired up, and because there's realistically, which is why I took a month off, nothing really going on in the sport to try and stoke the fires. Miami is definitely not leaving for the Big Ten anytime soon. Why? Why would Miami be begging to join any conference in the first place, let alone one, let's remember, that is suing them? Now, while the Big Ten isn't the exact entity suing them, through, adjacent, it's Wisconsin and the Big Ten, hand in hand. Why would Miami be begging to join when Wisconsin, with the blessing of the Big Ten, is suing them? The whole crux of the Wisconsin lawsuit over Xavier Lucas hinges on the memo of understanding that the Big Ten put together and issued to its schools. That would be like robbing or vandalizing a home and then asking the landlord, hey, could I rent or sign a lease? Like, what? Who does that? No one would do that. It doesn't make sense, right? And then I'm going to go even as far. Hold on. I need to bring this up. Pete Nakos recently just posted something, and I'm going to read it. And he said, Big Ten statement on 3 Sports, Wisconsin's lawsuit filed against Miami says, the Big Ten Conference is aware of the litigation recently filed against the University of Miami with the University of Madison, Wisconsin, and is supportive of UW's position. As alleged, the University of Miami knowingly ignored contractual obligations and disregarded the principal competitive entity, and that is fundamental to college athletics. Here's the juicy part right here. The Big Ten Conference believes that the University of Miami's actions are irreconcilable with a sustainable college sports framework and is supportive of UW-Madison's effort to preserve. Why would ever be begging to join a conference that's going to talk about them like that? Why? It doesn't make sense. Guys, question these things. Sources, the legitimacy, like connect the dots, right? And then lastly, why would Miami leave the ACC now after last year's changes to revenue sharing in the conference. If Miami was to leave the ACC now and go to one of the two major conferences, either the Big Ten or the ACC, it would be at best for a reduced share for the next 3 or 4 seasons, or until the next round of media rights negotiations, which is like, I think for the Big Ten, it's 2030 and then 2034, 2036 for the SEC, right? So Miami, who already is losing a fair share of about, I want to say, anywhere between $3 to $16 million compared to the SEC or Big Ten, would be losing way more than that at a reduced share, right? Then on top of that, they would then have to pay whatever the exit fee is. Now we know, when we covered, it wouldn't be this $250 million fee, but you're looking at anywhere between, depending on what year it is, 75 million to 12 million. Still a lot of money on top of that. So Miami, as a private institution, would be making a huge financial bad decision if they took that deal, And Miami doesn't get that state safety net money that schools like Florida State, UF, public schools get, and they don't also have the same alumni base to draw from. So I love when people are like, "Oh, Stadium's empty." It's not always empty, but we are Miami also, and there's a lot of stuff to do here. But what a lot of people don't know about and don't realize is that the entire student base is anywhere between, well, I mean, when I was there, it was 10,000, but I think now it's anywhere between like 12 and 15,000 students, including grad students. So at best, maybe you have 7 to 10,000 undergrads going there. It would take you 6 years just to equal what UCF has in one, right? Or a major university. So they're not going to get that alumni based money going in. And then again, just looking at the numbers, the ACC is maybe at the worst. Let's just say the most liberal numbers are 15 to 19 million less than the SEC or the Big Ten with the new payout structure that we're doing, right? So let's just say Miami wins. Their ratings are up. They're doing well. The worst case scenario, the most liberal case, they're going to be maybe 17 million down. Why would you trade that in, right? To be down by 50, 60 million, because again, you're going to half of whatever the Big Ten is making, right? You're going to lose that money. It just, you got to do the math. It doesn't make sense. And then listen, I know I'm going to sound like a homer when I go here. Miami is not Kennesaw State. It's not East Carolina. It's not, I mean, Tulane's got its own prestige because of its academics, but I refer to them in more of a football context. But the Miami brand, even 2 decades of irrelevance, 2 decades of mediocrity, which I will admit we've had, it doesn't go away. You're never going to beat the U. No other university is known as the U. Swag that comes from the U, documentaries out the wazoo. I mean, Pro Bowlers, Hall of Famers. Listen, it's just not there. The metric, when you look at the numbers of people love to hate us, and people don't love to hate irrelevant, worthless teams. Okay. Have we had a couple bad years? Absolutely. Have we been irrelevant for 20 plus years, roughly, give or take? Yeah, I would say that. I mean, realistically, we were still kind of competitive 2003 through 2006. But that aside, either way, it's not like we're a program that needs to beg. And if or when Miami does decide to leave, it would be the earliest at 2028, 2029. It's not now. It's not next season. You've got at least 2 or 3 seasons before Miami leaves, and it's going to have to be just before the next round of media rights renewals. And nothing is shown realistically that the ACC is on the brink of implosion, or that Miami's stock, like I just mentioned, is low enough to where it needs to beg. I don't see it. I see articles like this. I see message boards blowing up about stuff like this, and it realistically doesn't make sense to me. And I know you're saying it's because you're a homer, Chris, but I just laid out 3 key points of why it doesn't. And if you take whatever bias you have towards Miami out of the way and you just look at those, that makes way more sense, right? It doesn't make sense that there's no sources, that a conference that is, blessing a lawsuit against a university where Miami would go to them. And then lastly, the numbers don't add up, and there's no signs right now that the ACC is about to implode. and that it's literally going to be the Pac-12 2 or 3 years ago. You know what I mean? Like the ACC, especially given the competition right now, which I think we'll get into maybe next week. I think the ACC you're going to start seeing pick up. I think the ACC will no longer be while it's been about a decade of irrelevance with only two teams being competitive. I think you're going to see a more competitive ACC this season and moving forward. I think with NIL, I think with the revenue share, you're going to start seeing, and we are seeing already, the field level out. And I think you're going to see the ACC really kind of pull its stock back up. And again, we're going to see. But I can tell you one thing is for certain: Miami is not begging and is definitely not leaving this moment. 5 years from now, who knows? But at this moment, they are definitely not begging. They are definitely not leaving the ACC. Now, before we get into this next story, I have to put a disclaimer on this. I am not a professional. I am not Nostradamus who can accurately predict the future. These are just my best guesses based on what I've seen, the numbers that I've read that are out there, and what I'm hearing. But you know what? We're 2 weeks away. We got to predict the season. What is going to happen this season in Miami? All right. With that out of the way, let's talk about the best case scenario, right? Here's my best case scenario. You're looking at it right there. That's right. Undefeated. Some of you are hysterically laughing, rolling your eyes back so far you're going into a coma. But ride with me. Ride with me for a few seconds, okay? Miami cannot afford to lose more than one conference game all season based on Clemson and SMU's schedule. Those schools being the two other favorites to win the ACC, and we play SMU. So if we lose, they have a tiebreaker. So Miami can't afford to lose it. So in the best case scenario, Miami's going to win out, right? Next, Miami has high probabilities of going undefeated should they get through the first half of their season, the first 6 games. There are 2 out-of-conference games being in the early season, being the first and the fourth game, gives Miami a more favorable chance at winning. Since teams are kind of like brushing off the rust, they're getting into a rhythm. It's easy to jump on teams early in the season. Notre Dame is the first game, and they'll be traveling with an unproven QB, whichever one they choose. We still don't even know. I thought it was going to be Lloyd Carr's grandson. Now it looks like this Menchie kid is doing pretty good, and that they're kind of his style of play is kind of more what they're looking for. So, 2 weeks out and Notre Dame still doesn't feel really solid about their quarterback. Leads me to believe we have a chance there. Not to mention, take a water break. Notre Dame hasn't won since 1981 in Miami. Fun fact. They played all through the 80s, the entire decade of the 80s, didn't win once down here. Last time we played them in 2017, didn't win. It was kind of a drubbing. So it doesn't sound that too off that even though I think a 3-point or maybe 2.5 point favorite Notre Dame is, that we could beat them. Miami's next biggest out-of-conference game against the Gators, who will be coming off a major battle against LSU in Death Valley and then traveling for back-to-back weeks, does not bode well for the Gators, who were dismantled in their own stadium just a year ago. I know we saw the Gators kind of catch fire towards the end of last season. DJ Lagway was named the starter. He is the great hope. I'm not buying it, man. I don't think you get drubbed the way you did at home, then come to our house and say, you're going to be competitive and you're going to beat us. Doesn't happen. You couple that with an injury-prone QB and DJ Lagway, you could start to see how I'm getting to this conclusion. You've already had coaches even leave UF to come here. I think Billy is on the hot seat, even though, it's not official. We got to see where UF is. And let me tell you something. If anything, I think, let's just say we were talking about LSU earlier. LSU could do us a huge favor and wear them down. I would not want to play LSU and then come to us. That's all I'm saying. I know UF has got one of the hardest schedules in the country, but to say that we'll beat them isn't really that far-fetched and isn't really that hard. Now, on to the next challenge. Sorry, Bethune-Cookman and USF. We all know how those are going to go. Now, FSU, despite having home field advantage, at best, it would be a challenge for maybe a half a game. We're talking about a team that only won 2 games last year. And frankly, Thomas Castellano, if reports are true coming out of FSU's fall camp, isn't looking that hot, isn't looking that accurate, isn't looking that consistent. So, I again, I don't want to say we're going to blow them out. I don't want to say it's a guaranteed win, but common understanding would probably have you lean to we're probably going to beat them, even though they're going to be at home. Not to mention their stadium has just been renovated. They've lost about 20,000 seats or 10,000 seats. So who knows who will show up there? And let's just face it, I wouldn't blame. I would not blame. I lived in Tallahassee for a year. Yes, I went to FSU my freshman year. Um, if if FSU gets blown out by Alabama in the first game, I would not blame a single person in Tallahassee for not showing up for the rest of the season. Because what do they have to what do they have to go watch? Nothing. That team is going to be brutal to watch if it goes the same as last year. My hope, it's a little different. Hopefully they improve. Hopefully they gotten some good leadership into that locker room. They've built a culture in there. They can maybe remain competitive. I don't think they will. Next, we look to Louisville. And I think this will actually be a complete reversal given how last year's shootout was. I think this year's defense, our defense, Miami defense, will take the game in a completely different direction. You know, when you take out the secondary, you leave a lot of room for a shootout, which is what last year was. I think this, with being a Friday night primetime kickoff at home, opposed to a noon roadie like we had last year, it just bodes in Miami's favor. I think we can actually take that win and take that W. That leaves Miami 6-0 heading into late October, early November. In a best case scenario, I see Miami riding that momentum, learning from last year, locking in, and not taking the foot off the gas until they get to Charlotte. There, they will take on the Clemson Tigers, and will beat them for the ACC championship. I know you think I'm crazy. I'll explain why in my realistic scenario. Let's go to the worst case scenario. This is probably, doesn't sound too bad. 8-4. This is kind of where I would see if all the things fell off, if the wheels fell off this car right now, this is where I would see Miami. Miami would most likely split one of their 2 toughest out-of-conference opponents. In my belief, the loss probably coming from Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's the more competitive team compared to UF. I don't think UF has their ducks in a row like Notre Dame does. Not to mention Notre Dame competed for a national championship last year. UF barely competed in the SEC. I digress. In ACC play, they would probably end up losing in a heartbreaker to Louisville at home. I could see that happening. We've lost to Louisville in the past. We've lost to Louisville at home. Louisville does usually play us well. And it being a Friday night game, again, in a worst case scenario, I could see us losing. Next, to SMU. I think we would lose probably to SMU in a tough road loss. It would be the first time we're leaving the state of Florida. Maybe the guys don't have their stuff together. Maybe that loss to Notre Dame at the beginning of the season kind of doesn't give them that equal footing. Then you couple the left hook from Louisville. I think we'd be stumbling, going into that. So I think a loss to SMU in November in our first roadie. Besides, FSU, but FSU is not going to be a road game. Sorry, I just keep thinking about FSU being as terrible as they are. And then finally, I think we would probably lose in one of our 2 closing road games, either Blacksburg or Pittsburgh, either or. I put Virginia Tech because they played us the hardest. We didn't play Pittsburgh last year. And not only that, but Pittsburgh last year, if they do anything similar to last year, fell off their last 6 games. So you couple that with a Thanksgiving game, kids are getting ready for the holidays, getting ready for finals. I could see us having a better shot at beating Pittsburgh than Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech also is a better team. So I think we could lose either or, but as you can see on the schedule right there, I have it as Virginia Tech. Now, God forbid we lose to both, we would end up 7-5. But if that happens, you don't even want to know the can of worms that would probably be open. While 8-4 doesn't sound like a worst case scenario, it would highlight systemic issues that have not only plagued the program, but Mario. Mario, they say Mario can't get it done. This would prove that. While the loss to Notre Dame would be forgiven nationally, the potential losses to Louisville at home would end the winning streak that they started last year. We were undefeated at home last year. And a loss to SMU would be a major major red flag as to where the program is compared to a school who was literally in the G5 just 2 years ago. Okay. And then lastly, a late season stumble would once again prove that the Canes can't finish or stay focused late in the season. So this would obviously mean no ticket to Charlotte and another year of insignificance. So 8-4, worst case scenario. Again, this isn't worst possible case scenario. That's not what I'm saying. This is what I think would be the worst case scenario. What I think probabilities would be, what is within the realm of reason. Worst case scenario would be an FSU season, losing every game but two, right? I just don't see that happening though with the talent that we have. Now, on to my final and most realistic. Now, I originally had this as 10-2. I said my realistic scenario is us going 10-2. I went and made this graphic. I poured over it, went over the numbers, went back, looked at the numbers, and I just couldn't bring myself. I'm realistically thinking our only loss will be either to Virginia Tech or Pitt. I, again, put Virginia Tech for what I mentioned before, but let's go into this, right? Let's go into the most realistic situation. I think this team is solid. I think the team we have is a really good team. I think it's the best team that Mario's had in his stay here. We're going to do a preview in a few weeks leading up to the Notre Dame game of like what you need to know about UM and what you need to know about this squad. But I would even argue that this team is better than last year, right? And I know you're thinking number one offense in the country, yada, 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 yada. I think, yes, we're going to regress offensively. You know, you when you're the number one, you either stay the same or you go down, right? So I think that inevitably we are going to regress a little bit. I don't think the fall is going to be as far as most people think it's going to be. And I think the team, while young and unproven, I think this is a solid, talented team. I think that a lot of people don't realize because they just see freshmen or they just see, redshirt sophomore that these guys are unproven. They never started. You got to really look at, and this is kind of a teaser for the video we're going to do in a few weeks. Last year was a unique year, not only because of Cam Ward and what he did, but you also have to realize that Dawson really likes to construct his offense around a quarterback and what they're comfortable with. And I think when Cam came in, he made certain relationships. And because he was this one and done kind of quarterback, he really wanted to make sure that he got on with a certain group of guys, which is why you probably didn't see a lot of rotation last year. Also, a lot of those guys were older veterans. Dawson and probably Cristobal wanted to make sure they were putting their best players out there, which every team obviously does, but they wanted to make sure that the stars were aligned, right? So that's why you didn't see a lot of rotation of the younger guys last year. I think with this year not having that luxury of having that many proven veterans who have been in your team, yes, we've got some veterans coming in from the transfer portal, but your homegrown guys like Strap and Horton and George from last year, you don't have that. You've got some more younger guys. And those traits are never sometimes conducive for a perfect season, but I do leave room for high potential. And I am seeing it being as better than 8-4. I could see Miami splitting the Notre Dame and UF games, but again, in my heart of hearts, I really believe we could win both. And that's why I went 11-1. And again, that's why I also said 10-2, it's a realistic number, right? When you think, okay, where's Miami gonna go? Right. But if you keep the two, that means we have two ACC losses because I don't think we're going to lose to Notre Dame or UF. We could. We could lose. I don't know. But in my heart of hearts, I do think we'll only win two, which means if I wanted to stick to 10-2, that means we would have two ACC losses, which would keep us out of the ACC, which I think, again, that is a major issue that Cristobal has to get over. Miami has to get to the Charlotte this year. They don't necessarily have to win the ACC, but they got to punch their way to the college football playoff, which means they have to get to Charlotte, right? So I only see the one loss coming from either Virginia Tech, or Pittsburgh, and that's literally only because the brunt of our traveling is in the second half of the season. It's 3-3, and the two last games are in cold weather environments. Again, best case scenario, we're undefeated. Realistically, I just don't know. And Miami has a history of letting off the gas towards the end of the year. We did it last year with the best offense. Kind of be hard to believe we would do it with an offense that would be a little bit less than. But I still think 11-1 is the realistic record. And I think Miami goes to Charlotte with an 11-1 record, right? And I think they beat Clemson. I think, and even in the best case and the most realistic case, we get to Charlotte, we beat Clemson. And I know every single person is like, you are a lunatic. You are the biggest homer. You are the craziest person. Hear me out, okay? Yes, Clemson has all these returners coming back. Yes, Clemson has Cade Klubnik, and he's the greatest quarterback in the ACC according to the pundits and the coaches and whoever. But we beat Clemson 2 years ago with a backup, okay? With a backup quarterback. Now you're saying, Chris, they got better. We got better. They can get better, but we can't get better? Come on. Come on. Don't come at me with that. Okay? And everyone wants to talk about how we lost Cam Ward and we only got Carson Beck. I'm telling you guys, Carson Beck's the real deal. I believe it. Again, I could be wrong. I want everyone to blow up my comments, blow up this video, tell me I'm a crazy man. But I'm telling you, studs on the O-line, studs in the running back room, great quarterback. And I'm telling you, do not sleep on these wide receivers. I think you put all those together, you have an improved defense. Why can't we compete with Clemson? Why can't we beat them? We beat them before. Why can't we beat them again? Again, I don't think Clemson has gotten that much better in 2 years than us. We were better than them with a backup. Now imagine we're putting in an SEC who was a Heisman hopeful, first round draft pick last year. We're going to get into all the myths about Carson Beck in another video, but either way, I'm telling you, man, Miami beating Clemson, it's not as crazy as you think it will be. It's not that crazy. Well, guys, we have another one in the books. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.